Blessed morning, my beautiful people. You know who it is. It's your boy, B to the A to the S to the I to the C, B to the I to the T to the C to the H. Word to you, mother. My name's Steve. This channel is for extra witches. Thank you for tuning in. Now, anybody that watches the channel for quite some time, you'll know earlier in the year I managed to pick up a vintage bottle of Nuit De L'Homme, which I love. I don't love the performance of the current formulation, but I managed to get this 2011 batch. Now, the performance isn't much better, if I'm honest. It's similar, a little bit better. But that mainly comes from the fact that it's a little bit thicker, the cardamom is a bit stronger, so it gives it this kind of bit more thickness, a bit more depth, so you kind of get a better sillage. It's just a bit more noticeable, just mainly because it's a bit more of a kind of thicker fragrance. But the longevity isn't much better, it's only a little bit better. So I was a little bit disappointed that it didn't perform longer, but I was pleased that it was kind of a bit more noticeable and you do get a better sillage. Now, so love my vintage batch of Nuit De L'Homme. However, after kind of purchasing this, I did kind of realise that you can get some vintage batch of Nuit De L'Homme clones, like inspired by the vintage batch. Now, Dua do a version which apparently is an absolute beast, but Alexandria Fragrances also do two different versions now. And I've been trying to get hold of them for some time, and I've finally managed to get hold of the latest one to go along with the original. So I'm talking about Ombre Noir and Ombre Noir 2. Now, Ombre Noir 2 is pretty much a new release. I've been waiting for ages for Alexandria in the UK to get a shipment from the US, so this is kind of really quite new. Now, the original Ombre Noir is based on a vintage batch of Nuit De L'Homme. I don't know which year or anything like that, but basically it's meant to be vintage Nuit De L'Homme. I'd never smelled this before, but I saw that they're releasing Ombre Noir 2 and I was really curious. I wanted to see, like, is this even better? Does it compare? Now I've got a vintage batch to sort of compare them to. How do they stack up against the original? I don't know what the reasoning is for releasing Ombre Noir 2. I don't know if it was to kind of try and get it even closer to the original, if they weren't quite happy with this, or if it was better performance or whatever, but I'll get into my findings in a moment. So this video is all about vintage Nuit De L'Homme and if these two versions of from Alexandria are any good. Before I get into my findings, I do need to declare that these two bottles were sent to me for free of charge. That wasn't my intentions. They've not kind of brought this video about. I was the one that wanted to do this video. I contacted Alexandria in the UK and asked about buying Ombre Noir and Ombre Noir 2. They told me that they were still waiting to get Ombre Noir 2 in the UK, and I've been having to wait for some time. And then once it eventually arrived, they just said, look, we're going to send you these for free of charge, so you can kind of, because this is quite a new release, so you can kind of do the comparison and let people know. So I did get these for free, so just bear that in mind. I will be honest, as you will find, because I don't think either of these are perfect. But yeah, I just have to declare that before people kind of, you know, get all pissy in the comments. So I've been wearing these for loads of days. I've done various combinations and comparisons. So I've had one on one arm, one on the other, as well as the original, the vintage. I've not done any comparisons to the current formulation. I've only been comparing these to the vintage. So I've been wearing that either kind of on my lower arms and these two on my upper arms, etc. And I've done that for several days, and then I've worn one for another day, one for another, just to see how I get on with it, etc. So I'm fairly confident that I've sort of thoroughly tested these. Now, I've currently got them sprayed on my arm just to kind of help my sort of chain of thought. So I've got the vintage there, I've got Ombre Noir there and Ombre Noir 2 there. So that's what you're going to see me smelling. So the original, the vintage, is really well balanced. It's, as I said before, the cardamom is stronger in the older formulation, but it does still blend very nicely with the lavender to give this slightly sweet but kind of sexy, manly fragrance. Really enjoy it. It's very well blended. Performance isn't brilliant, but I'll get onto that when I talk about how the performance compares. Right, scent-wise, Ombre Noir, which is here. In short, now what I should say before I kind of get into this, both of these do smell good, okay? So this is the bit where you think I'm going to be shilling, because I think either of these you'll do okay with. They both smell good and they'll both work. And in many ways, if you're just smelling them on their own, you'll probably be like, yeah, that's Nuit De L'Homme. It's only when you do smell it in comparison that you can see that there's some really notable differences. I can easily tell the difference between the three of them, to be honest. So take that as you want. But anyway, Ombre Noir then. To me, Ombre Noir is quite close to the vintage, but it comes across as it's a little bit sort of biscuity. I think it's lacking, where the original Nuit De L'Homme is quite well balanced between the lavender and the cardamom to give it this nice sweet sort of spicy floral. This I think is lacking a little bit of the lavender. So it does smell good, and I have been enjoying wearing this, but I think it is lacking a little bit of the lavender, and it comes across as a little bit drier than the original and a little bit more kind of biscuity. And I don't know why that adjective comes to mind, but that's kind of what I get. But it does smell good. Now, Ombre Noir 2, as I say, I don't know what the motivation was behind this. I don't know if it is to boost the performance or to get it smelling even closer to the original. But for me, smell-wise, this diverts, I think, a bit further from the original. Either that or they've overcorrected, because this, it's like this one's a bit short on lavender. This one's a bit overdosed on lavender. They've really amped up the lavender for this version, and it gives it this kind of floral sweetness that comes across as a bit soapy. And again, it does smell good, but it's definitely amped up lavender in this, which, and as I say, it makes it a bit soapier in a kind of sweet floral kind of way. And in many ways that does also make it smell a little bit more synthetic. So, but the performance on this is a lot better. So let's talk about performance. The vintage batch of Nuit De L'Homme lasts about 5 hours on my skin, so it's not brilliant, it's okay. I get about an hour of projection, if that, and then it's sort of quite soft. It's basically a skin scent, but it does last about 5 hours. The current formulation is worse than that. It only lasts about 4 hours on my skin, if that, to be honest. That's at a push. So the current formulation is really quite poor, where this is a little bit better, but still not brilliant. The Ombre Noir lasts kind of similar amount of time. The performance is very similar to my vintage batch, to be honest. I think when you first apply it, this does smell a bit stronger. My wife agrees. She said this smelled stronger than that one. I think it does project a little bit more, but performance-wise, with regards to the longevity, it's very similar. It lasted about 5 hours, and then I was kind of struggling to smell it. And the projection was, again, fairly similar. It was probably a little bit longer. It's probably more like an hour and a half. Yeah, probably an hour and a half, where that's maybe an hour, if that. So projection was a little bit longer. Longevity was very similar for Ombre Noir. Ombre Noir 2 definitely lasts longer, without a doubt, and I think it projects more. So I sense that might be the reason why they've actually kind of released it, to be honest. I think there's one, I wonder if they've just tried to boost the performance a little bit, because they have achieved that. This did last about 6 to 6.5 hours on my skin, so it definitely lasted longer, and it was definitely more noticeable as well. It definitely projects more. I don't know if it projected for longer, but it was just more noticeable in that projection. It seemed to be a bit stronger. But for me, I'm not sure if that warrants choosing Ombre Noir 2 over Ombre Noir. The reason I say that is because, as I mentioned earlier, Ombre Noir 2, though it does smell good, it's definitely got amped up lavender, which makes it a lot more of a sort of floral, and it gives a sort of floral sweetness to it that comes across as a bit soapy and a little bit synthetic. Where for me, Ombre Noir is lacking a bit of lavender, but it does smell, I prefer the smell of it. So I was going to quite happily sit here and recommend that you get Ombre Noir. It doesn't perform as well as Ombre Noir 2, but I was going to say, don't bother, get Ombre Noir. That was going to be my top tip. However, my wife kind of pissed on that parade, because she kind of disagreed with that, really. So she's not a huge fan of the Nuit De L'Homme. Whenever she smells the original, she just says it smells like talc. She smelt this one and she said it was just smelled stronger than that one. And then she said this was her favourite. She actually preferred Ombre Noir 2. Now, I don't know why she preferred that. I don't know if she preferred it because it was sexier, more manly. I don't think it is. Or if it's more because it's a bit more floral. And as I said earlier, I think it's a little bit more feminine. I think a woman could easily wear Le Nuit De L'Homme, especially the current formulation. But I think this Ombre Noir 2 is more unisex. On the whole spectrum of unisexuality, this is definitely a lot more flexible, and I think if the woman in your life loves the smell of Le Nuit De L'Homme and would like her own version, I think this would be a good shout, to be honest, because it's a little bit more floral, which makes it a little bit more feminine. But to me, it does make it a little bit more synthetic. If I had to rank these three in order of smell, I would go for the original Nuit De L'Homme from Yves Saint Laurent, followed quite closely actually by Ombre Noir, and then Ombre Noir 2, even though this is definitely the best performing fragrance of the three without a doubt. For me, Ombre Noir still smells really good. I really enjoy this one. Yeah, it's more manly than this one, definitely, but I think this smells really good, and it does actually boost the performance of the vintage batch ever so slightly on my skin anyway, mainly in the projection stakes. It's just a bit stronger, so it makes it a little bit more noticeable for kind of longer, but the longevity was fairly similar, to be honest. So that's it. I'm going to stand by that. Despite what the wife says, I'm going to kind of go against her. Please don't tell her. And I'm going to recommend, if you're going to order one of these two, stick with the original Ombre Noir. It smells almost as good, and it's a little bit better performing, and it's just a little bit more manly compared to the Ombre Noir 2. The only caveat I'm going to throw in at this stage is I hear loads of comments that Alexandria fragrances always get better with time. If you leave them to sit in a cupboard or whatever in the dark for like a month or two, apparently they always seem to get a lot better and a lot stronger. So I don't know if that's going to be the case here, and the Ombre Noir 2 might actually change a little bit. But yeah, apparently I've never really seen any experience of this personally, but a lot of people say leave them to macerate and they do get better with time. So perhaps if I've had these for longer, this is potentially a newer batch than this, so that might affect it with time. So I'm just going to say that now just to cover my ass. But do comment below, have you found that? Is there any fragrances from theirs in particular that you've noticed that it makes a big difference? Do comment below, because I'm really curious. So that's it, that's my recommendation. I hope you've found it useful and you've got something out of it. If you have, do kind of let me know, and do hit the like button. I do really appreciate it. And of course, if you haven't already done so, I'd love it if you could subscribe. Do also kind of comment below, let me know, what do you think to these two? Have you tried both Ombre Noir and Ombre Noir 2? Which do you prefer and why? Do let me know. It is all personal preference at the end of the day. Thanks for watching. Hopefully in the coming weeks I'll try and get a hold of the newer version of vintage Nuit De L'Homme. Apparently it's an absolute beast. So yeah, I'll be really curious to kind of get my nose in that. So stay tuned, and hopefully I'll bring that to you guys. Thanks again for watching. I will see you for the next one. Take care. Much love.